You'd think that after 58 years on this earth, 3 ex-wives, 2 wars, 1 legal, 1 military, and a decade of dealing with Fortune 500 boardrooms, I'd have grown immune to the flavor of petty. But no, turns out there's still a breed of human that stirs something special in me. They're called HOA Karens. Let me set the scene. It was early June, that sweet pocket of time before the mosquitoes earn their rent and the air gets too thick to breathe. My daughter, Claire, her husband, James, and their 2 kids had finally made the pilgrimage up to the lake cabin, a place that's been in my name longer than my last marriage lasted. The cabin sits on 50 acres of pristine forest land in northern Michigan. I bought it cash in '92 after winning a wrongful termination case that made a certain auto manufacturer cry themselves to sleep. The land includes the lake, by the way. Not lake access, not shared shoreline. I own the damn thing. It's in the deed. Water, dock, trees, fish, mine. Anyway, Claire's been working double shifts in pediatrics, and James just survived a merger that nearly ate his job whole. The kids, they needed sun, smoke, and burnt marshmallows. So I told them, come up, use the cabin, light a fire, grill something dead, let the boys get muddy. I drove up a day ahead to prep the place, stock the fridge, clear fallen branches, and if I'm honest, to get some silence before the storm. The moment my daughter's SUV pulled in, the forest cracked open with laughter and the smell of hot dogs. Life was good. Then she showed up, hairsprayed like it was auditioning for a wind tunnel test. Stepford wife posture, a clipboard, of course, and a smile so tight you could bottle it and sell it as industrial sealant. She strutted out from the trail that separates my land from the HOA neighborhood a mile down. That's right, a whole mile away, yet here she was, marching like she owned something. "Excuse me," she said, in that tone women like her use when they're not used to being told no. Claire was kneeling by the fire pit, coaxing the coals. The boys were throwing rocks into the lake, a family tradition as sacred as Sunday church. I stepped between clipboard and daughter. "Yes?" I asked. "I'm with the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association," she said. "There's been a complaint." I blinked, once, slowly. "A complaint?" "Yes, about the smoke, the noise, and unauthorized gatherings near the lake," she sniffed, eyes scanning my property like she was mapping out a trespassing lawsuit. Claire rose behind me, a little confused, a little amused. "Ma'am," I said, "this isn't part of your HOA. This is private land." She cocked an eyebrow. That's what the last man said, until we showed him the map. She flipped through her papers, full of highlighter marks, legalese, and meaningless printouts that probably gave her night sweats of fate. Authority. I didn't raise my voice. Never needed to. Years in the courtroom taught me that the most dangerous man is the one who doesn't need to shout to be heard. "Lady," I said, "you're standing on my land, not HOA land, not shared green space, not disputed border. Mine." She gave me that look, the kind of look someone gives when they've decided facts are optional. "Regardless," she snapped, "this kind of behavior affects community morale. If you won't stop the barbecue, I'll have no choice but to file a formal complaint with the HOA board." Claire's jaw fell open. James actually snorted from the porch. Now, I could have ended it there, walked away, grilled some ribs, let Karen go back to her HOA kennel. But sometimes, just sometimes, life gives you a moment so golden, so poetic, that you have to lean in. I crossed my arms, nodded toward the lake. "See that water?" I asked. She followed my finger, probably expecting me to tell her it was shared use. "I own it." Her eyes narrowed. "See that fire pit? Built it with my bare hands in '93. Still legal. Still mine." "Those kids?" I pointed to my grandsons, now watching with wide eyes. "They're throwing rocks into my lake, next to a cabin that sits on my land. Bought with my money before your HOA was even founded." She opened her mouth. I raised a finger. "And the cherry on top?" I smiled. "I'm a lawyer, retired, civil litigation, 35 years. Her mouth snapped shut like a mousetrap. Now, I continued, you have exactly two options. You can turn around, walk that clipboard back to your HOA-sanctioned flower beds, and never set foot on my land again. Or you can call your little board, file your little complaint, and watch as I sue your collective asses for harassment, trespassing, and defamation. There was a beat of silence. Then, in the distance, one of the boys launched a rock into the lake with a satisfying splash and shouted, "Boom!" Karen flinched. I smiled wider. But she wasn't done yet. Oh no. See, people like her, they never retreat. They regroup. And what she did next told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just a Karen. She was a vindictive Karen. She walked away, but not before saying 4 words that turned this from an afternoon inconvenience to a declaration of war. This isn't over yet. I watched her disappear into the woods. My pulse didn't spike. My smile didn't fade. In fact, I felt energized, because what she didn't know, what most people never seem to guess, is that I don't bluff. And when I go to war, I don't lose. I didn't say a word about her little threat to the family that evening. No reason to spoil the night. Claire's ribs were perfect, a little burnt on the edges, just how I liked them. And James finally stopped checking his phone like the world depended on his email replies. The boys had stripped down to their shorts and were daring each other to jump into the lake, water cold enough to make your soul shiver. It was one of those rare evenings when the world softens around the edges. Warm smoke, easy laughter, and the glow of firelight on happy faces. But in the back of my mind, I was already preparing. See, I've learned something after a career of watching people lie under oath and stab their friends for a slightly better plea deal. Stupidity, when paired with entitlement, is a dangerous cocktail. And Karen? She was practically soaked in it. I didn't expect her to give up. I expected her to escalate. And oh, did she. 3 days later, it happened. Claire had taken the kids into town to pick up more supplies. I was out back splitting logs, not because I needed the firewood, but because nothing centers a man like an axe in a stubborn oak round. That's when I heard the sound. Voices. Plural. Clipped. Organized. HOA sounding. I stepped around the cabin and there they were. 5 of them, standing like a suburban firing squad in beige and pastel. Karen at the center, of course, still wielding that clipboard like it was a holy relic. Flanking her were 2 men and 2 other women, all with varying expressions of self-importance and sunscreen. They were standing on my land, again. "Mr. Dempsey," Karen announced, her tone coated in sugar and superiority, "we've returned to give you one final notice before this becomes an official dispute." I said nothing at first, just walked past them, slow and deliberate, and took a seat on the Adirondack chair by the fire pit, picked up my glass of sweet tea, sipped once, made sure the silence dragged just long enough to make them uncomfortable. Finally, dispute over what, exactly? I asked. "The lake," she said, as if that clarified anything. "The fire pit, the activities. We've reviewed the original Whispering Pines boundary documents and found ambiguity regarding this area. Since no fence marks the limit, and since it borders the HOA protected green zone, we are within our rights to—" I actually laughed. Not a chuckle, a real laugh. The kind that makes people pause because it's not the reaction they're trained to expect. Karen's lips twitched. "You reviewed boundary documents?" I said, wiping a tear. "Did your committee happen to consult the county plat maps, title registry? Hell, even Google Earth?" One of the men frowned. Karen said, "Karen," I interrupted, turning to her, "wouldn't know a property line if it was painted on her driveway." That stung. I saw it. But Karen, bless her deluded heart, pressed on. "This isn't about lines, Mr. Dempsey. It's about community impact. Fires by the lake cause smoke drift. Children playing create excessive noise. Unauthorized lake use violates HOA Serenity guidelines. The board has voted unanimously to issue you a cease and desist." She handed me a stapled packet, cheap paper, double-spaced, full of invented rules and barely legal threats. I didn't even look at it. "Cease and desist from using my own land," I said. "That's rich." "You can appeal the decision in writing," she said, "but until then we expect compliance." I stood, calm, measured. "You know," I said, "you really should have knocked first, maybe asked a few questions, like whether I had any record of this ambiguity you're clinging to, or if I might have, I don't know, video footage of your trespassing from both visits." Karen blinked. "I also would have told you," I added, "that the green zone you're talking about, it used to be a hunting easement. I bought it from the county 3 years ago. Public record. Now it's just part of my yard." One of the men cursed under his breath. "And here's the kicker," I said, walking up and gently pushing the packet of nonsense back into Karen's hands. "That piece of paper, it's worth less than the ink on it. And if you send one more of those to me or set foot on my land again, I'll file a restraining order so fast your clipboard will burst into flames." She opened her mouth. I wasn't done. "I'll also be reporting all 5 of you for criminal trespass. Misdemeanor, yes, but enough to stain your little HOA credentials. Oh, and since you're using a homeowners association to target someone outside your jurisdiction, that could open up civil liability for the board." I let that sink in. One of the women looked at Karen. The second man actually took a step back. "Now," I said, my voice ice cold, "get off my land." They didn't argue. They ran. Not literally, but close enough, fast walking down the path like kids caught toilet papering a cop's house. Karen tried to hold her chin high, but her troops were abandoning ship, and she knew it. Still, she managed to mutter, "You'll regret this." I didn't answer, because the moment they disappeared down the path, I walked into the cabin, sat at my desk, and pulled out a folder I'd been saving for just the right occasion. Inside it, every title deed, every legal boundary survey, every purchase order, tax receipt, and permit since 1992. But that wasn't all. Because what Karen didn't know was that I'd spent the past 48 hours doing some digging of my own, on her. And what I found? Well, let's just say the HOA wasn't the only thing she pretended to run. I've always said, if someone's loud enough to bark rules at strangers, there's a good chance they're breaking a few of their own. Karen was no exception. The day after the HOA committee paid me their ridiculous little visit, I poured myself a strong cup of coffee, sat down at the desk by the lake-facing window, and started doing what I do best, digging in places people don't want you to look. See, I may be retired, but a man doesn't forget how to read between the lines, especially not a man who spent 3 decades chewing through paper trails and building lawsuits out of loose threads and hubris. Karen Ellsworth, that's her full name by the way, had been the self-proclaimed Queen of Whispering Pines for the better part of 6 years. Technically, she was just the HOA president. Unofficially, she ran it like a monarch, minus the crown, but not the attitude. She'd spearheaded new quiet hours, tripled the violation fines, forced residents to paint their houses HOA-approved earth tones, and even tried to ban inflatables from pool parties because they were unsightly. Half the neighborhood hated her, but no one had the guts or legal muscle to stop her. Until now. Her big mistake was bringing her circus into my backyard. I started where any good attack begins, paperwork. Turns out, Karen had been collecting HOA dues via a third-party platform, one she personally administered. Nothing wrong with that. Unless you noticed that the deposits were filtering through an LLC not registered to the HOA, but to a private entity named KEL Property Services. Want to guess what the KEL stands for? Yep, Karen Elaine Louise. She'd been skimming, not much at a time, maybe 3 to 5% of the total dues, just low enough to avoid suspicion, just frequent enough to matter. And it didn't stop there. The HOA landscaping contract, overpriced by at least 40%, was held by a company in her brother's name. The security system upgrade funds? Redirected to a dummy account in Illinois with no documentation to show how or where the money was spent. And the kicker? A former board member had filed a whistleblower complaint last year, buried it under the HOA's own meeting minutes. Karen had voted to close the matter due to insufficient evidence, citing harmful gossip and toxicity. I printed everything, filed it neatly, indexed it, cross-referenced it. This wasn't just HOA mismanagement, it was fraud. Wire fraud, embezzlement, abuse of office. Now, a younger me might have marched down to the Whispering Pines clubhouse and slammed the binder on the table like Moses bringing the tablets down from the mountain. But I'm not that man anymore. I'm slower, sharper. I believe in precision humiliation. So, I made a few calls. First, to a friend of mine, retired from the county attorney's office, now dabbling in private investigation. I handed him everything and asked him to package it in a digestible report for the HOA board. Second, I emailed one of the disgruntled residents I found on a public forum, a woman named Trina, who had posted just 6 months ago about Karen's dictatorship ruining her son's graduation party. I asked if she'd be interested in seeing what I'd uncovered. She replied within the hour, "Oh my God, yes, tell me everything." So I told her. And I sent her the report. She sent it to 20 other HOA members within the day. By the following afternoon, the board had scheduled an emergency meeting. That same night, Claire and James and I sat out on the deck with wine and firelight while the kids slept. "I still can't believe that woman thought she could just come in and bark at you," Claire said, sipping Chardonnay. James shook his head. "She does it to everyone. Our old neighbor in Whispering Pines got fined for having a hammock." "Hammock?" I asked. "Too visible from the road." I smiled, leaned back in my chair, and looked out at the lake. "She's not going to enjoy next week," I said. James looked at me. "What did you do?" "Nothing she didn't ask for." And it was true. Karen had practically begged for it. Every smug step onto my land, every baseless threat. She thought she was punching down, but she forgot something important. You never know who you're poking until they poke back. They say karma takes her time. That's a lie. Sometimes, if you grease the wheels with the right paperwork and a nudge from the right people, karma shows up early, dressed in business casual and carrying a folder thicker than Karen's delusions. The emergency HOA meeting was set for Saturday, an open-floor review of recent financial discrepancies and leadership decisions. Translation: Karen was about to walk into her own firing squad. And I wasn't even on the guest list. Didn't need to be, because Trina, bless her nosy little heart, had kept me in the loop the entire time. She even sent me the HOA's digital newsletter with the official meeting agenda. Item 1. Clarification of jurisdictional boundaries. Item 2. Allegations of financial mismanagement by current president. Item 3. Community concerns and leadership review. That middle item? Yeah, that one was mine. Claire wanted to come, James wanted to bring popcorn. I told them to stay put. I wasn't going in person. I didn't need to. This wasn't about me standing over Karen with a sword. This was about letting her kingdom turn on her. So instead, we staged a quiet counter-barbecue. Same afternoon, while Karen stood in a folding chair under the HOA clubhouse awning, squirming through Trina's PowerPoint presentation of fraudulent LLCs and misuse of funds, I grilled a porterhouse on my deck, drank a dark beer, and listened to the distant sound of raised voices drifting over the treetops from Whispering Pines like sweet, sweet jazz. An hour in, Trina sent me a text. "They've called for her resignation." 10 minutes later, she's screaming at Dan from the finance committee. Then, "They're voting." And finally, it's done. She's out. The board has frozen all spending and asked the county to audit the HOA account. I let out a low whistle. Especially Claire looked up from her book. "That her?" I turned the phone so she could read the messages. She smirked. "Damn, that was fast." "Fast justice is the best kind," I said. But don't worry, Karen still wasn't done. Oh no, people like her, they never walk away clean. They thrash, they blame, they spin stories until they're the victim of a great cosmic injustice. And predictably, the next morning, she came storming up the trail to my cabin like a woman with something to prove, only this time, no clipboard, no posse, no pretense. Just a red face, clenched fists, and desperation dripping off her like sweat. "You," she snarled. "You did this." I didn't stand, didn't move, just sipped my coffee on the porch and stared at her over the rim of my mug. She stomped closer, waving a manila envelope in one hand. "You sent them lies, fabricated documents. You're going to jail for defamation, you sick, bitter—" "Karen." My voice was calm, almost bored. "You're trespassing." "I said," I cut in, "you're trespassing." She froze. "I've got you on camera," nodding to the security post on the deck. "Same as last time. You step 1 foot closer, I press charges, and unlike your HOA violations, mine actually hold up in court." She stared at me, trembling. She wanted to scream, wanted to claw, but the fight had gone out of her eyes. Her little kingdom had voted her out. Her dirty laundry was hanging from every metaphorical clothesline, and all she had left was that envelope of excuses and a whole lot of pride circling the drain. "You think you're so clever," she hissed, "living out here like some old warlord with your fire pits and your smug little smirk." I finally stood, slowly looked in her square in the face. "No," I said, "not a warlord. Just a man who owns what's his and knows how to keep it that way." And then, the cherry on top, I smiled. "Tell me, Karen, how's community morale?" She flinched, didn't say another word, just turned, stormed off, and disappeared into the trees, probably for the last time. Because within 48 hours, the board filed a formal complaint with the county, attaching my evidence as part of the record. My investigator friend offered to help them prepare the full fraud referral. Karen's name was officially on file. Embezzlement, fraud, civil violations. All because she tried to shut down a family barbecue next to a lake she didn't own, on land she couldn't touch, against a man she couldn't outmatch. And I wasn't even done yet. Because while she'd lost her seat, her rep, and the cozy nest she'd built out of other people's money, I had one more little surprise in store. Not out of spite, out of principle. Some men would have stopped there. She was humiliated, outvoted, exposed, and under official scrutiny. But I've never been one for half measures, not when someone comes from my family. Not when someone tries to strong-arm my grandkids off my lake with the force of a laminated pamphlet and a crooked smile. See, Karen's downfall had been legal. Now it was time for it to be personal. And poetic. It took just one more call, to a man named Stuart Grady. We go way back. I helped him keep his dealership from going under in 2004 after a competitor tried to smear him with a phony workplace safety scandal. Stuart never forgot it. He also just so happens to own the property directly adjacent to Whispering Pines, a small but strategically placed 5-acre parcel the HOAs always coveted. Why? Because it contains their only other viable lake access besides the main trail. For years, the HOA had been trying to negotiate with Stuart to buy it and turn it into a community dock and picnic space. He always said no, he didn't need the money. But when I called him, he didn't hesitate. 3 days later, he signed the papers. I bought it outright. Cash. So now, not only do I own the lake, the surrounding forest, and the cabin land, I own the only other entrance to the water from the Whispering Pines side. And I posted 2 signs. One at the trailhead, private property, no trespassing. Trespassers will be prosecuted. and one right where the HOA used to set up their 4th of July picnic table, close to the edge of the woods. This land is under new ownership by order of Dempsey Holdings, LLC. I didn't expect applause. I didn't need it. But Claire got a message a few days later from Trina, who told her Karen was seen crying in her driveway, screaming at 2 board members and threatening to sue everyone involved. They just nodded, took her clipboard, and left her standing there, mascara running, pride shattered, screaming into the void like the HOA had been stolen by pirates. It hadn't. It had just been reclaimed by sanity. And as for me, I sat on the deck again that evening, same chair, same fire pit, same lake. My grandsons were roasting marshmallows. James was playing some old country on his Bluetooth speaker. Claire was wrapped in a blanket with a glass of wine, smiling for the first time in weeks. We didn't talk about Karen. We didn't have to. Because sometimes revenge doesn't need to be loud, or brutal, or bloody. Sometimes it's just owning the land they thought they controlled. Sometimes it's a sign in the dirt. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes,
lawyer, if she can afford one, we'll fight it. But it's on record now. Forever. And the kicker? Her new address on record in the legal documents? It's not Whispering Pines, because they kicked her out, evicted her for violating community trust and endangering the HOA's legal standing. No more pastel fortress, no more clipboard, no more Queen Karen of the Pines. Last I heard, she was living in a duplex 15 miles out of town, above a vape shop, barking at the neighbor kids through her blinds. Fitting. And me? I've got 55 acres, a lake that shimmers gold at sunset, and a fire pit that burns cleaner than most people's consciences. But the real reward? Claire said they're coming back next summer. Same cabin, same lake, same grandkids, and not a damn Karen in sight.